sometimes writing SQL queries in Python code can seem a little out of place. That's why many Python developers use an Object-Relational Mapping tool, or ORM, to work with databases in a more Pythonic way. ORMs allow you to work with Python or your language of choice instead of SQL to query and manipulate the data in your databases. Now, there isn't just one ORM you can use in Python. Various libraries implement this functionality and overall concept, and SQLAlchemy is just one of the most popular ones for relational databases. SQLAlchemy also works with lots of web frameworks, including Flask, and databases such as SQLite, MySQL, and Postgres, which is why we're focusing on it in this course. Even if your Python script is just a data analysis tool that interacts with the database but has no UI, you can still use SQLAlchemy. Now, SQLAlchemy is a large SQL toolkit with lots of different components, including an ORM, and these components can be used individually or combined together. Although we won't be going through all of its components, the two largest sections are SQLAlchemy Core and SQLAlchemy ORM. While both have different ways of interacting with your database, the biggest difference between these two is that SQLAlchemy Core has a schema-centric view, which is focused around tables, keys, and SQL concepts, while SQLAlchemy ORM encapsulates the schema with business objects. This encapsulation makes your database interactions feel more like normal Python code. With SQLAlchemy ORM, you abstract many of the underlying database concepts. With SQLAlchemy Core, you use the SQL expression language, which is a mild abstraction of the typical SQL language. The abstraction allows it to be a consistent language across many relational databases. The SQLAlchemy ORM is focused around the domain model of the application. It leverages a unit of work pattern to maintain consistency between objects and the database. It also provides an even higher level of abstraction on top of the SQL expression language that enables the user to abstract database concepts even more. This allows you to work with your database in an object-oriented way. Even if you're using an ORM, you are still welcome to use the SQL expression language as well, and even mix and match the two when appropriate. When using SQLAlchemy Core, SQLAlchemy ORM, or another ORM in Python, it's important to consider the pros and cons and the implications of this design decision. The main pro is that Python developers can interact with the database using the language they know and love and abstract the database system. This can speed up web development, especially at the beginning, since the developers can use a language that they're comfortable with. Of course, some developers might not mind switching between languages, but it can be easier to get the first prototype done using a single language. Now, if you're a master at SQL, you'll likely be able to write more performant queries with SQL than with an abstracted ORM. On the flip side, if you're not familiar with SQL, the ORM can give you some pretty fast queries out of the box. Using an ORM also shifts the database complexity into the application code rather than keeping it in its own system. With the abstraction, an ORM can prevent you from understanding what SQL and other technologies are doing under the hood. But since it simplifies working with the data layer immensely, many developers choose to use one.